There's a clipboard coming around for attendance.
Adrian did, I just stapled.
Okay.
Why?
I was wondering why this one doesn't change.
Yeah. Oh, it can. You have a lot of.
Plus.
Yeah, plus with a lot of.
Yes, I space favor that you say.
What is that? Oh, yeah, because no one, Gary sent it to me and I printed it. And I said, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Is that one name?
Oh, sweet.
Thank you.
Have you already highlighted?
We look for a highlighter.
It's terrible idea. Separating you now.
For the record,
You have a highlighter?
on my, you want me to get a picture?
Is it on your desk?
Oh, Lord. So I just wanna point out that I was here first.
Yeah.
Tracy.
Yeah.
I can vouch for Jeremy on this one.
How you doing, John?
Get this one? Yeah, you did.
Yep.
Perfect. Did you get this one, Heather? Cooperating.
Okay, we're gonna get started in just a minute. If you wanna throw them back, on the table outside there, if anyone needs extras.
Come on in.
Hi, Eva. Hello. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Find a seat. All right, there's gonna be a clipboard coming around. If you have not signed, your name on it, please go ahead and record that you work here for us. Welcome to Education Tuesday. Happy to have you guys here. We have a really great opportunity for you guys today to hear from our preferred in-house lender, Jeremy and Angie, along with the legendary Mike Braddock. Jeremy actually reached out to me and said, I see a gap that needs some help. And so, Mike and I, we would like to do a class around, low appraisals. And I said, let's do it. This is amazing. So, keep in mind, all the legal size papers you have, that's for the next class, which I assume you're all staying for because it's a very important contract class that you need to know stuff for. These are for Gary's class that's coming up. This is the format you want to have handy. This is where you can take notes. This is where you can, do your 10-5-1-1, all your takeaways that Mike and Jeremy are gonna share that you just have to remember. You need the notes, your action plan for what you're gonna do going forward. So that's why that is in front of you. Clipboard coming around, we are recording. Anyone have any questions? Let's go, without further ado, our presenters.
Barb, why you didn't bring any fun hours for the meeting?
You know what? I got eaten about an hour ago. Sorry you weren't here.
No heckling from the audience, please.
Yeah.
No heckling from the
I
audience.
already think we have to separate the two of the middle,
Uh-huh.
but thank you for coming. Yeah, I saw a need where more often than not more often, people get hung up on appraisals and they come in, does not come in. Even if it doesn't come in, it doesn't mean the deal's dead necessarily. There are ways to work things out. There are sometimes where it doesn't change the actual transaction at all. We're gonna show you some examples of that today. But what we wanted to do was talk about how to handle things proactively up front from a buyer's agent standpoint, seller's agent standpoint. That's much simpler today. And then Angie and I are gonna talk about the appraisal process from a lending standpoint, so you understand better what actually goes on, what are the ramifications of a loan appraisal, what can be done about it, and the challenges involved with that system. So, let's see, go first. We have the first slide.
Like Jeremy said, there's things we can do as agents, like before the appraisal happens. Not only as a listing agent, but as a buyer agent, there's things you can do, then we're gonna talk about things that you can do if you get an appraisal cut after the fact. What listing agents do, what buyer agents can do. So some of these are proactive, some of them are reactive from both sides. Listing agents, I mean, obviously, pricing the property realistically. That's a really good start. Do a thorough CMA using recent closed comps, not just active pending sales, but watch for outlier comps that are unique or in a superior location. If comps, and this is important because this is what appraisals use, if comps are limited due to a rural or uniqueness, spread out geographically versus going back in time. So appraisals go back about 6 months, usually max. Sometimes it's hard to find comps in that time frame. So rather than going back 12 months, try to go out geographically. Comp one right now, it's in Carlisle, there are no comps. It's really, really difficult. So I'm going out a little bit further geographically to try to bring those comps in. And so that's part of the proactive thing. Knowing the financing type, that really helps. So that we know FHA and VA loans have stricter appraisal criteria. Prep your seller for potential appraisal issues or conditions based on the loan type. And if any kind of, anybody has any questions, just pop in there. This is one of the things that I like to do, especially if I think the appraisal may be a possible issue. I prepare an appraiser package. This says meet the appraiser, never meet the appraiser. I don't even think that's allowed, but, I leave printed materials at the property, usually the MLS sheet, the subject property, and then a list of upgrades or improvements if applicable. But more importantly, the comp sales, and then I take a highlighter, I highlight the number of beds and baths, square footage, price per square foot, types of EAC, all your HVAC stuff, finished space versus unfinished space, size of the lot. Those are all things that are relevant to an appraiser. Any special features, be sure to highlight any non-visible upgrades, which things you can write a little note down and attach it to your comps. It says here, permitted to be present during the appraisal answering questions. And then again, as a listing agent, for the appraisal screen buyer offers, favor buyers get strong down payments and or appraisal draft language. Any questions on that? That's the listing agent pre-appraisal, whatever.
So what I've done in the past when I was the seller, my agent actually, I was there and met the appraiser there. It was that way if the appraiser did have questions on upgrades or things that happened that we did to the house, that I could have some.
Sellers are the benefit there.
Okay.
You know, sometimes.
Some of that's better.
They may have, visibility issues and things like that. I prefer just giving them the information. Yeah, and I look at it like this, I don't want somebody to tell me how to do my job, but if someone's willing to step in and help me, then never fails.
Every time.
Never fails.
Yeah, it would be the last time.
Nope,
You gotta pull out.
yep.
For 5 minutes and.
And a whole nother class,
You guys wanna take bets?
Every time. First time on board.
over 130.
Done.
I'll go with
My 65 answer.
$20 go.
Here it goes.
Now making sure that I have everything on.
I think you're onto something. There's gonna be a cell phone jar. It goes off, you gotta drop the 20
Back in
in.
the 90s,
Well, the rest is broke.
Yep.
remember, everybody, turn off your cell phone.
Yeah,
You need to bring that back.
yeah.
It's all good, Mary.
We love you.
So I like to put the information for the appraiser right there. Yeah, not doing their job for them, but if they're willing to help. I think most appraisers appreciate it. Some of them have egos and might be a little bit of conflict, but I'm leaving the information there anyway. And of course, I'm gonna leave the information. I think it's favorable to my listing. I mean, why not? Yeah. But it's justifiable to I'm not just throwing stuff in there. The What can buyer agents do? And you're a buyer agent concerned. Prepare your buyer financially. Explain the risk of the appraisal shortfall early, especially in hot markets. Advise getting pre-approved with room to cover a potential gap. So if your buyers aren't able to do that regardless, but it doesn't hurt to have those conversations. Include appraisal contingency language thoughtfully. Use language to limit or cap the buyer's exposure. Just negotiated a really, really awesome deal for my sellers this week. All surrounding the appraisal gap. One agent didn't understand it, the other one did. Guess who got it? So, it netted my sellers probably an additional 24,000 with solid buyers. Having those conversations is really helpful. For example, buyer agrees to cover up to $5,000 on an appraisal shortfall. If the shortfall exceeds this, buyer may terminate or can negotiate. We're gonna talk about the appraisal gap addendums. There's a new one coming out September. Our friend Gary's gonna be covering that for us. So understand that document. If you understand that, that was the thing that this other agent didn't understand it, like it fixed. If you understand that, it makes you a stronger advocate for your client. Choose properties wisely. Be cautious about offering significantly over this price unless the comp supported or unless your buyer can cover the difference. Call the listing agent. Ask what upgrades the seller made and then prepare an appraisal packet. Here's another thing I ask is, where did you get this number from? Did the seller pull it out of the booth, or is there legitimate comps to substantiate that push price?
Do you ever get, cause I ask that too, especially if it's like in a neighborhood that I'm kind of familiar
Yeah.
with the prices and I see. Do you ever get somebody that's upset at you? Cause I've had like, I felt like a little bit of hesitation from a listing agent. Like if I'm questioning them, the pricing strategy, if I ask them that, do you feel like you get any pushback? Cause I ask that often when I think properties are overpriced and I do believe there might be an appraisal issue in the future. But I get like agents that are upset.
So that's a great question, Damaris. And I would say, depending on how you phrase the question, it's a really good thing to start off with. But then what I'd follow up with on that is if the listing agent is getting defensive or offended by that, maybe there's a reason for that.
Yeah,
You know the neighborhood.
right.
You know what they're gonna sell for.
But right, we don't normally go around questioning where the value is, but if you see that it's slightly overpriced, or in some cases now I feel like it's very overpriced.
Yeah.
I just had this conversation with an agent, that we did get an appraisal cut, and we discussed this like ahead of time, like I'm putting comps, I told him, because I said, I think this probably is a good idea. If you put comps, and you're seeing something I did, maybe put a packet together for the appraiser, because I don't see where the value came in, and they didn't like it. And
They
then,
didn't like that?
No.
Did they prepare a packet for the
no,
appraiser?
I don't believe they did, and we ended up getting a cut, and it was fine, because I feel like at the end, he kind of was expecting it, but he didn't want to tell me that he just didn't have any comments.
So when you said it turned out fine, what happened?
It came in 15 less, and we got it at 15 less.
So we're not good for your buyer.
Right.
Yeah, because the listing agent
Right,
did their
and
job.
And even the 15, I think the appraiser was being generous by 5,
Wow.
because everything that came up was 20.
So when you're dealing in a neighborhood where there are a lot of conflicts,
Right, it was a
it's pretty
community.
easy.
Exactly.
And if we get these one-offs out there,
And the food is hard.
yeah, good stuff. Thanks, Damaris. You guys want to talk a little bit about the appraisal independence regulation before we go into the appraisal process? Or do you want me to go with that? Okay.
Okay. Now the really fun stuff, regulations, yay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna explain to you what the appraisal independence regulation is. It is a regulation in place to ensure that the appraiser performing that appraisal is giving an unbiased opinion. And what does that mean? That means no one involved in the transaction can have direct contact with the appraiser unless it is to the determine scheduling of the appraisal itself. Or if the appraisal comes back and it has repairs on it, you can always call the appraiser and say, if we handle it this way, will that be accepted to you? And that be J or B. Those conversations you can have directly with the appraiser. What can you talk to them about? Value. Not talk to them about value. If you do, you violate the regulation. The appraiser has the right to say, I'm out, I'm not doing this report anymore. You'll have to hire somebody else. I've been happening a couple of times over the years. Now, why do you think that regulation is put in place? What do you know?
So like, for the last, for the same level, people were encouraging appraisers.
I call it encouraging. Yes.
Yeah. To appraise.
For the massive, real estate bubble that impacted the real estate industry and the mortgage industry occurred. Like, you could directly order an appraisal from somebody. I would directly order appraisals all the time from appraisers in that market area. But what you had happened was the governor of New York state found, after investigating foreclosures and things, was that people were putting pressure on the appraiser to bring in value that wasn't there.
So you could say, hey, I need you to do this appraisal at 123 Market Street, by the way, a couple of Hershey Park tickets in here waiting here with the name on it.
Well, there's that. Maybe they push money at them to entice them to bring values that weren't there, or they just simply say, we're not gonna send you another appraisal order if you don't get this in. Okay, undue influence on the opinion of
Did
value.
you do that? You were in the industry. back then.
Wow.
Oh,
Not now.
Of course not.
I was, I
Jeremy, would I ever do that?
don't think you were. I really
Never. Don't touch it long. Well, not really long.
Right.
Weird, but- Okay.
Anyway, that's as part of the SAFE Act, that was also made a regulation as well, to ensure that you're getting an unbiased opinion of value. Now, yeah, go ahead.
So that rule, if we get an appraisal cut, so we're not supposed to call them to discuss it, cause I do that all the time. If one of my buyers or sellers gets an appraisal cut, I automatically call the appraiser to talk about it. So we're technically not supposed to do that.
It's a fine line. I mean, you can talk to them about the rationale, or you can bring something to their attention, maybe they miss.
Right, I've
That-
only
that's
done it
okay.
in that situation, like if I feel that I use a comp that they might have missed, I'll ask them, cause you obviously have to deal with it, and the
Yeah,
deal right on their hand. But like I've had the conversation, I think you missed this combo, I feel like you didn't give it enough value for that, so is that okay?
that's okay. There is a process for all of that. I'm sure we'll discuss it. And that's the reconsideration of value. And, yeah,
Yeah, I was just gonna say, are you, I guess either probably fine to be able to talk to them about like classification? Like, if you're like, hey, this is C5, and I'm like, hey, this definitely is C5, like, is that something that,
or you can talk to them about that. That is, if you don't know what that means. There are condition ratings on appraisals. The appraiser determines what category of condition that property is in with the appraise. And it's ranked anywhere from C1, which is this is a brand new construction, to C5, which is ready to fall over. It's in, it's really in disrepair. That's a C1.
C6 or C7, right?
I think it was called or C. When it gets to C5, that's when you can't get a regular loan. That's when it has to be at least a C3. I mean, it has some things wrong with it. They're not impacting the integrity of the structure. And then the appraisal is done accordingly. One of the adjustments you have on an appraisal report is condition. So if your property is not poor of a condition, it's rated C4, but the comparables are C3, that means they're gonna do a negative adjustment to the price of those comps because of the condition.
I only asked because that's something that for a long time, I was having a lot of conversations with, because
I think
properties
those,
were distressed, and
I think those conversations are valid because talking about a very subjective thing.
Yeah.
They try to quantify it by giving them the C1, C2 rating and on go, but it's really a matter of opinion. That I think is okay.
see that C one, sorry, one, it's on the report somewhere, oh,
It's in the
okay.
grid. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you have a C rating for condition, or a Q rating for quality of construction, or in the grid where it counts out how your property, your subject property matches up with the complete complex.
Okay.
And then they'll make adjustments if there are differences in condition or quality of construction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But, get back to reconsideration of value, that is a process in which, you know, I have a buyer with the merits and there's no rate of cut. It's like, and this is how it should have been used. I can then go back to the lender for them to look at it, because every lender has an appraisal requirement. Underwriters, by and large, especially on conventional, the underwriter reviewing the file for income, assets, and so forth is not reviewing the appraisal side at all. Lenders have an appraisal team that looks at appraisal reports and everyone's signing off on that report. So I send that reconsideration value request to the lender. They review it, they determine if it's a valid request. If it is, they pass it on to the appraisal management company. What are those? Because I can't have direct contact with an appraiser. So every order that's done for an appraisal report has to go through an appraisal management company that is selected by the lender. So the request goes to them, they go to the appraiser and they say, can you take a look at this comp and determine if you think that it just your opinion about it at all?
So a discussion that came up at a different training was talking about appraisers who are, because it's third party and the lenders are, you know, picking different and it's rotating. There's some appraisers that are picking up jobs that are outside of their scope, that they may be more closer to Philly than they are to Central PA. So they're doing these appraisals in areas where they don't really understand the market.
Yeah.
So they're applying what their thoughts are, but not understanding the market. So is there a way to challenge those?
Right. It can be hard. It can be really hard to do that.
The good AMC, they're gonna access that.
They are.
I mean, yes, but
The ones that we use, I've never had that happen on any of my life. Have you ever had, like, the AMC that our lenders use is pretty good about that specifically?
Yeah. And two lenders that we use most often appear to use the same appraisal management company, so they're getting local people to go out.
That's a good question. I've had plenty.
yeah,
Yeah, and less obviously whenever I'm working with A plus, but it's,
You can attempt it, will you be successful or not?
and I think that's the frustrating part too.
Yeah.
From whether you're the agent or you're the buyer or seller, feeling like you have a way to combat an appraiser who you feel is not appropriately doing their job.
Yeah, right. And here's the thing about appraisal independence regulation. Unless there's something egregiously wrong in the report with the appraiser, you know, it's the fishing thing and did not do, won't correct it, you can't get a reward. That appraisal is the appraisal for that transaction with that. So the only choice you have then, like your mortgage brokers, you work with more than one lender, is you really can't move forward with that appraisal that's been provided. You can always start the lending process over with the buyer with a different lender and or appraisal that way. But the lender that has it right now, I'm not gonna work it.
For some of the new agents in here, can you tell me how long, that appraisal stays with that property for the government loans?
It gets interesting with that. So the only one program where the appraisal sticks with the property is FHA. FHA appraiser who's been designated as such, they've taken the training and considered it an approved appraiser. Their appraisal sits on that property for 6 months. So that deal blows up, and that buyer walks, or the seller walks away. Someone else wants to buy it using FHA financing, they still have to use that appraisal. Now, the interesting thing, and this is something interesting to get into, is that any appraisal that's done, whether the deal stands or falls apart, all the data in those reports are uploaded into the collateral underwriting system. That collateral underwriting system maintains all that information, so it's going to see that information when another appraisal is done, along with any other appraisal that's been done in that particular area. that market area. And for the schools and so forth.
So even on a conventional, those stay enough.
All the data
Scored
stays there.
against it. So like that data is now included in the US, and so then if it gets another appraisal in 3 weeks, when it goes back on the contract with another lender, they're gonna use that data that's in that pool to use to score that appraisal.
It's not necessarily that the report is sticking with the property, but the data is there to influence any future appraisal stuff.
Right, so if it appraises for 50,000 more 3 weeks later, it might raise a red flag as to why the
Yeah.
status there.
Before we move on to the next slide, and I'll try to be quick, so I talked a lot. Everybody always loves appraisal waivers. Right, so, when can you get one? What decides if you get an appraisal waiver or not? The answer is the automated underwriting system determines that. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have automated underwriting systems that we upload all of our data into, all your clients' information, the credit report, the property address, the price of paying for it, all that stuff, how much you're putting down, how much money they have, all of those things are uploaded into that system. It provides a report immediately stating what type of appraisal reports needed. It'll say you need a full one, or it will say that you don't need a full appraisal. In fact, will accept the purchase price as the market value, but they want a property data report. And all that is your appraiser still goes to the property, they take measurements, they take photos, they check to see if there are any health or safety hazards at the property that need taken care of prior to closing. And then they submit that report, there's no value on it. So it's still like an appraisal waiver, but the appraiser still goes out to show the lender that this property is existing and it's in good condition. And everything on public record matches up with what they found when they went on the property. And then, lastly, you're lucky enough, you get an appraisal waiver where you don't need one at all. No one goes out. First price to accept gets the value. Now, when can you get an appraisal waiver? Or we must put at least 10% down. Without putting 10% or more down, they don't have a chance of an appraisal waiver coming back. This is only on conventional loans, it should drop the end. Any government loan requires a full appraisal. No waivers at all. For property data report, I've had 2 this week under contract, 3% down, and I got property data report. Findings. I don't even know right now, 3% down.
Generally speaking, those offers are at value, under value. So if you make an offer on a
Yeah.
property that's like $15,000 over asking, so you're probably not gonna get.
You're probably not gonna get a waiver because the system knows that we're pushing the limits of what's reasonable. Knows.
So we as agents can't call you up and say, hey, Jeremy, can you give me a solid and give me a waiver on this one? Got a couple of hard tickets here for you.
No, it doesn't work that way. There's no influencing the computer software. So yeah, that's what determines it. No other way. I look at it, guys. That's my portion. Well, thank you.
Okay, so if you do need to get a full appraisal, this is what the process looks like. So you're under contract, we run through the system, it says, hey, I need a full appraisal. I go through the lender's portal and I go to the AMC and I order an appraisal. They'll go to the AMC will then kind of push out the request out, and then an appraiser will accept that request. And then I'll get notified, and then that appraisal will reach out to the listing agent or the seller, depending on who the contact is, to schedule that appraisal that's responsible. Again, everything has to go through the appraisal management company that is chosen by the lender. So it's like through the lender portal they choose, and it's like a triple blind. I can't have any idea what that is. And honestly, I don't even know who the appraisal is until I get the report back. So we order the appraisal, and then the inspection occurs whenever it's convenient for both the appraiser and the seller listing agent. And then once the inspection occurs, generally it takes maybe less than a week to get that report back, depending on how busy the appraiser is, and also how rural the property is. If it's more of a rural property, it usually takes a little longer than if it's something that's like in a neighborhood. Obviously, there's more data for them. So once the inspection occurs, the report is then sent immediately to the AMC. And the AMC does quality control to make sure that the appraiser report is up to their standards. Once their quality control is done, then it gets sent to the lender's appraisal, the lender's appraisal department, and then it goes to another quality control. And then once they approve it, then it goes to the underwriter.
And at that point, we get access to the appraisal report that we can then send to you guys as your buyers. But again, it's going through two quality control. Once it gets to the underwriter, it's run through the collateral underwriting. And my collateral underwriting system takes data from every single appraisal that's been ever done since it was invented. How long ago was it invented?
At least 10 years.
So any appraisal that's been gone through lending, at least for mortgages, it's gone through this, well, this underwriting system. And then it scores it based off of what the report risk is. And it's 1 through 5. One being, is it one good or one bad?
One is good.
Yeah, one is great.
One.
Anything below a 3 requires an additional review. So if they run it through the collateral underwriting system and it's scored at a 3 or below, then the underwriter is then, no, 3 or below, it has to go back to the,
3, 4, 5.
has to go back to the appraiser because there needs to be a fix, like error needs to be fixed. So that could be, like we had said earlier, if it's suddenly an appraisal was done 3 weeks ago and the appraisal was 50,000 over, it might draw a red flag. And we might have to go back to the appraiser and ask, hey, why is this one so drastically different? Support your comps, support your quality, support your C rating, support your Q rating, square footage is different. They might come back with a couple of different things, and then the appraiser will have to go back and either make adjustments or double down and rationalize why they made those decisions. And then we'll keep going through COS until it gets a score rating and the underwriter approves the report. If for whatever reason, the underwriter and the appraiser don't come to a conclusion that satisfies both people, they could deem the report sufficient. And if that's the case, the AMC will automatically order another appraisal report at no cost to the buyer whatsoever. So if that costs them order a new one and try to get something that passes through the collateral underwriting system. And then once the decision is made, if it's accepted or deficient, then obviously if it gets accepted, it'll clear underwriting and then the report is then good, and that's the report that we have to use for that file. So once it's deemed to be approved by the underwriter, that's the report that we're using. That's the value that we're using. So if it comes in under, if it comes in over, that's the report that will need to be used for that specific underwriting file. So at that point, we'll let you know, hey, this is the report, this is the value. And then if it's an appraisal cut, then we'll have to make some adjustments and figures on that. Where? Yeah.
Yes, now we're talking about reactive. This is after the appraisal. What happens if an appraisal comes in undervalued? So we're gonna have tips for listing and buyer agents. First one is for listing agents and challenge the appraisal. You can file a reconsideration of value request to the lender. Jeremy and Paul provide better comps or missed upgrades, kind of like what Maris was talking about earlier. Sometimes the second appraisal may be warranted, which I think had one of those recently in the last couple of weeks. You can negotiate. Options include, seller lowering the price or buyer covering the gap or split somewhere in the middle. Seller could offer concessions elsewhere. For listing agents, you could also ask for the buyer's appraisal report if allowed you to review the appraisal for inappropriate comps, missed features, or errors in calculation or condition.
Yeah, there we go. For a newer agent, could one of you go over what tidewater is, so that way they're not blindsided by that?
Okay, so this only applies to a VA then. VA has a guideline, it's actually a very nice guideline, in fact, where if the appraiser goes out and they determine, I'm not bringing this in at a price, they're duty bound under those guidelines to contact me or an agents or officer on that, saying, having difficulty, can your realtors provide us with some help with this? They won't tell me any information about what they're doing, so. I can't ask them what comps are you using, right, or what value are you actually coming in at, they will not tell you, they won't tell you that. But it gives us the opportunity to actually, for pursue a reconsideration of value, without having to go through a lender process. I can deal directly with the VA appraisal. VA is only one program that considers my company, our company, the lender. So you can actually order appraisals through the VA portal directly, they assign the appraiser, it's VA approved, and then, you can communicate that appraisal directly. I can't, I'll look at it at this value, that's the VA fraction.
You're saying VA is the only one that considers you as a burden lender?
Yeah.
Strangely, but yes.
I have a lot of success with the farm water though, 'cause they really do wanna bring it in. Like, they're one of the few appraisers that are like, I really wanna bring it in that value for you to help me out. And I mean, they're really want to do that. And if for whatever reason the tag water initiative doesn't work, I constantly provided that still will help him, then the reconsideration of value process for VA is super easy and I've already had success with it. Frankly.
Even if the appraiser says, here's the report, I still couldn't bring it in a value. If it's within 10% of what you need it to be, you can go directly to VA's appraisal department at the VA, and they will look at it. So I've had success with that too. And anytime I've ever had to do that, they come back and say, yeah, it's fine. Then I go back and value that we needed. VA is the only one program that's like that.
Yeah.
So for buyer agents, you can review the appraisal, look at incorrect data, find square footage, features, location, miscellaneous, or even zoning. Ask the lender if a reconsideration of value is an option. Will we negotiate the price? Use the appraisal as leverage to lower the price if the seller is motivated to go alive. Remember, the seller has got a lot vested in this transaction because they've gone through inspections, now they're dealing with an appraisal, they're probably 2 weeks or more into the transaction. They don't really want to go back and start over, so think about it as leverage also. Evaluate buyer's ability to cover the gap. So if your buyer has cash, consider closing at the price, not explore options like seller concessions or a split, or as we'll get into later, maybe restructuring the loan. Okay. Last but not least, you can always use the appraisal contingency to fix it gracefully. If negotiation fails, buyer has an appraisal contingency, they may walk away and keep their AMD. Again, they're best as well. They're going to want to keep it though alive, but if you use that as a last resort, they're not going to respond to that. Next, we'll get into a couple of examples.
So this was my deal that happened a month or two ago. So originally they were buying it for $269. It wasn't Larkins. And it was a recently updated property. They just did a whole bunch of work to it on the inside. They were doing 20% down. They needed around $72,000, give or take, to close. And then on the deal was doing around $1,900, which is kind of where they wanted to be. They had plenty of extra money to work with, but they only wanted to use around 70 if they had to.
Can I just add something, Andy? For people that don't understand the license market, there's nothing like it. Okay. No. But, so now you have this
Yeah,
unicorn pop up, right?
yeah, and they, I think that they updated it for the market value. They did granite countertops and like, aside from personal preference, there's no value in adding granite countertops to a house like this, and so that's kind of where the seller was running into, like, they do want to make money back, so they wanted to sell it. Honestly, I think they looked at it at 275, so 269 was, negotiation on their part. So obviously, it pays for 214, which is crazy. You did do a reconsideration of value. This appraisal report actually went back and forth between the underwriter and the appraiser a couple times because the debts were very high on the collateral underwriting system initially. And so they were going back and forth, back and forth. We did a consideration of value, and 214 is where it landed. That was the final approved appraised value. So I went back and I was like, all right, guys, this is not great news for you, but this is where we're at. The seller tried to walk away, but I was able to kind of negotiate it, so I figured out how much the seller needed net, and so then I worked backwards. And so I was like, all right, well, why don't we reduce the price down to 250? And they had plenty of money to cover the difference. So the down payment was still technically 20% because the appraised value was what the 20% was, so I still kept their equity position in place and didn't have to pay mortgage insurance. Their loan amount was significantly less than I needed to bring them up 95 to closing, which they were comfortable doing based off of the circumstance. So it ended up working out great for both the buyer and the seller. We were able to keep our equity position. Their payment was lower and they said would use a little more money than they initially wanted, but based off of back and forth, when we were at the very end of the process and they just needed to move. So we were able to make it work for everyone. And I was only at $19,000 cut for the seller rather than, 70, 30, 40. So I was able to make it work. Not a lot of people are gonna figure that out or have that conversation with, it was just Jen's deal. And Jenny and I were on the phone for maybe 45 minutes to an hour trying to figure out how to make it work. What we needed to do to make it work, how did we keep the seller on the line because they were willing to walk away. And it ended up working out for everyone.
One of the key to making that work was knowing that the seller side was looking for.
Right.
Once we know, once the seller wanted that out of this, really, can figure out what figures need to be. Let's give this a go.
Everyone's happy and they love it after, yeah.
For those of you who weren't here on Tuesday for team meeting, and I said that some other market centers, because we're in multiple market centers, and I listened to their preferred lenders, where they hope and dream that stuff goes through. This is the difference between hoping and dreaming and knowing and doing. So just know that the preferred lender in our office knows what they're doing and they will come up with a plan. And if they can't come up with a plan for it, it means it probably can't happen. So I've been on the phone many times with Jeremy in the past, like, but we can do it this way. He's like, no, we can't. So, but it's because like, there's legit no way of making that happen, but it's something that lenders, some lenders and other market centers can't fathom.
Well, they don't understand the guidelines,
Yeah.
like A plus does.
Yeah.
Both of them, and understanding the guidelines gives them strength in this competitive market.
Yeah, I think we asked questions, like, I asked Jenny, well, what do we need to do to keep the seller on the line? She's like, I'm not getting paid enough to build this for either. So like, I have a lot of skin in that game also, and so it's, once you ask the right question and you get the information you need, it's not that hard to figure the puzzle out. It's just asking the right questions and having the knowledge and experience to actually do it. This isn't, I don't think it's rocket science, it's just a little bit more work, which neither of us might do. I mean, the seller was like crying, or the buyer was crying and close, she was so upset that she was taking that out. So like, it's just a little extra effort to make everyone happy. It's really, honestly, just being human, but.
All right, now, talk about my example number 2. Okay, so this is one where, original price was $263, cash flow was about $118,000. Because they're putting 40% back, they're one of very well, 157.8. The payment was $16,122. You had an appraisal cut. $248. Okay, so this scenario, because the buyer had so much money into the deal, they agreed on a purchase price falling between the 257. So the buyer's technically paying, $9,000 over the appraised value, but in the end, it didn't impact them at all.
It might be the same thing.
Yeah. Because the price was lower, they actually ended up saving money. Their equity position changed from 40% down to 36.27, which makes no difference in their terms. The rate didn't change. Nothing changed about the deal. They were in a position where it's gonna cost, they're gonna have mortgage insurance. So being able to just say, this is all we need to do. We just keep the loan amount exactly the same, it doesn't hurt you in any way. Your payment's the same, you bring less money to the paper. So that one actually closes tomorrow. So it's not always the depth of the deal. private property doesn't appraise. If there's a lot of equity in the deal for the buyer, often you can just restructure the financing and nothing changes. Standpoint of how much is that payment gonna be for the customer? That was one that was a little easy to figure out.
I'm a little bit harsh.
And you gets the fun ones.
I do.
Has anybody in here ever had any confusion over the appraisal and forms that we use for transaction terms? I have, you know, they were a little daunting, but I have one from Florida, it's so simple, a fifth grader can understand it. But I know we're getting new ones, and I think they're a lot easier to understand, so I would encourage anyone that doesn't understand or use them a lot to stick around for the class for o'clock today.
Yeah, they'll tie very well with what you just went over. Anyone have, oh, yes, there were.
You have to provide the list of agent of the appraisal report.
No, that is up for the buyer.
It's considered the buyer's property, they pay for the report, it's theirs. Now, as a matter of courtesy, we always share it with their local too, since you know it came in valuable. If it didn't, we're gonna call you first before we even say anything to the client. We'll say, you know, it didn't come in, they asked 250, it came in at 235. How do you want to handle this? We can send it to them if you want us to, but we usually put that back on the buyer's agents flat because you need to have a conversation with your buyer first. So that's what we do.
Ultimately, it's up to the buyer whether they would like to share that with the.
Yeah,
or not.
you can't give it to anyone else without the buyers.
That everyone's paid for, so.
Because I had one where we were clear to close on the transaction and at the very end, they couldn't come to terms on the septic issue. And she walked away and another buyer is in second in line, to get this property. Listing it going back for them. Say, back in the market if you want it. Yeah, we do. And, so that was Andy wanted a copy of the appraisal report. You know, the buyer is no longer buying the property, it's still not my right to give her the investigation. So I had asked her, she said, she was like, Jesus. I said, sorry. Not let me release it. The buyer in that situation had to get a new report anyway, so
Any other questions?
Jenny later did have a comment in the Zoom chat. There must have been a situation that Angie was referring to.
Yeah.
And Jenny raised her hand and said, that was me, and Angie was wonderful, so I just want to make sure that we give,
She texted
me
too.
we give credit where credit is due for that. I appreciate her, sharing that.
When you got that restructured price, how did you get there?
That was the
negotiation.
that's you guys. That's you and the buyer, even for listing agent, working it out between the clients. That's where you're gonna fall.
Now, when I was working on that deal with Jenny, I did know what the buyer wanted, like what their final number or the seller's final number was, so that I met them there and worked it that way.
We usually don't have that information.
But yeah, normally I don't know that, and that's like, you guys have to negotiate, like, we'll tell you, like, this is what they can afford. And then we'll let you kind of negotiate the price based off of what the buyer and seller can want, and then we go from there.
Yeah, but you just tell us, it's where we're at. And even before you have both parties sign off on that change in the purchase price, let us run the numbers for your buyers so that they're comfortable with it. Sign. Yeah. We're happy to help. Any other questions? Great. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you for presenting. Yeah, thank you for seeing the need and filling it. We appreciate it. Well, before anybody leaves, scan the QR code, scan the QR code, scan the QR code. Welcome back. Tell us how it was. Good work. Scan the QR code. If this one makes you sign into Monday, tell me, and I'll give you the little one, but this one should be good work. If you're a Zoom attendee and you have the ability to scan a QR code and leave feedback, I'd love it.
I was a time.
Aren't we all?
Oh, yeah.